last story of the night, which is RFK Jr. announces his independent candidacy. There's a couple of things I'm going to point out. I have a couple of clips for you that I'm going to share from his announcement in Philadelphia, and then we're going to look at some funding from the guy who claims to be free from corporate interests. Let's get into it.
But the good news is that people like yourselves are finally fed up. Something is stirring in us that says it doesn't have to be this way. People stop me everywhere at airports, at hotels and malls, on the street, and they remind me that this country is ready for a history-making change. They are ready to reclaim their freedom, their independence. And
I saw that and I thought,
and that's why I'm here today. I'm here to declare myself an independent candidate
David, I know, I couldn't find any clips where that sign didn't pop up somewhere.
Independent candidate for President of the United States. That's not all. I'm here to join you in making a new Declaration of Independence for our entire nation. We declare independence from the corporations that have hijacked our government.
That's the first lie. Declaring independence from the corporations that have hijacked the government. So RFK Jr. is not independent from corporations. I'll show you the receipts in just a second.
And we declare independence from Wall Street, from big tech, from big pharma, from big ag, from the military contractors and their lobbyists.
That's the second lie.
And we declare independence from the mercenary media that is here to fortify all of the corporate orthodoxies from their advertisers and to urge us to hate our neighbors and to fear our friends. And we declare independence from the cynical elites who betray our hope and who amplify our divisions.
But he's one of those elites.
Finally, we declare independence from the two political parties.
Lisa, I have no idea. I've watched multiple clips to try to find ones that didn't have this sign, and this sign is everywhere, but that's a good question. I don't know what's on the sign.
And the corrupt interests that dominate them and the entire rigged system of rancor, of rage, of corruption, of lies that has turned government officials into indentured servants for their corporate bosses.
Okay, let's do this vid first, and then we'll go to the other ones. First point here, the corporate part. RFK Jr. is taking corporate money. I don't know why he's trying to pretend like he's detached from corporate interests. He's not. You're taking corporate money. You're connected to corporate interests. And I'm going to show you a receipt later on that's going to show you exactly what that interest is. He talks about not connected to big tech. He is connected to tech. I'm going to show you a receipt for that as well. When you see like who's fundraising for him, how much is being fundraised, where the money's coming from. So part of what he said in that speech is incorrect. Now, the people in the crowd are just cheering it on because, again, they're in love with the personality. They're inspired by the person. Like one of the things Roger Meadows has constantly said is that a lot of times when it comes to political candidates, people focus more on the personality and they become in love with the personality and not so much about the policies. And that's what I've seen started to happen with a lot of candidates, but also, of course, RFK Jr. This is why some people can't criticize him. Now, some people have changed their mind. Some of RFK Jr.'s stands have been like, fuck that. This guy's crazy. He's trying to like declare war and wants to give Israel weapons and all that stuff. He's not a peace candidate. I withdraw my vote. Some people called that out, like Kim Iverson. Some people backed away from that. But then there's still some people that is very clear that regardless of what he does and what he says, they continue to defend him. And that is because they have fallen in love with the personality complex. They're not paying attention to what the person's doing, what the policies are. They're fangirl, fanboy. And that's what's happening. So let's go to this second clip here. This one is when he talks about the labels and how they don't make sense anymore. Now, you know, it's very interesting because basically what RFK Jr. is doing is he is taking things from Bernie Sanders' campaign, but adjusting it to fit people across party lines. Something that we did ask Bernie to do. Listen to this.
I'm happy to say that the old political alignments are dissolving. Right and left. The right and the left have become all mixed up anyhow. It used to be the Democratic Party opposed censorship. It was the Democratic Party that wanted to rein in the military and the CIA. It was the Democratic Party that fought corporate influence. Remember when Wall Street and big corporations all supported the Republicans? Well, who is the liberal now and who's the conservative? Who is the left? Who is the right? These labels make less and less sense. And out of habit, we still group ourselves around the empty husks of those old alignments and threadbare ideologies. But now that habit is breaking down. That's why half the electorate no longer identifies with any political party. And 63% of Americans want an independent to run for president. Of course, the outer structures of the party still dominate the political landscape, but they're hollowed out from within like a building full of termites. What kind of new political structures might emerge from those ruins? What is politics going to look like when it's no longer us versus them? American democracy should be more than just picking between two candidates anointed by shadowy institutions.
So you see what he's doing? He's pointing out the fact that political candidates are chosen, right?
Big oil funds the Republicans. Big tech funds the Democrats. Big pharma and the military contractors make sure to give to both. Instead of two parties, we have this kind of uniparty, a two-headed monster that's constantly bickering with itself as it leads us all over a cliff. And at the bottom of that cliff is the destruction of our country. Neither party has offered any kind of meaningful resistance to the endless wars that have sucked dry our wealth and slaughtered our youth.
Pause. See, now he starts to bring up the endless wars. See, this is the part about RFK that I think a lot of people were familiar with when he made his initial announcement for president, where he complained about the endless wars. And he presented himself as a peace candidate. But, you know, this is in direct conflict with his statements about giving aid to Israel, giving weapons to Israel and standing on their side. That's still war. And not only is that still war, but that's genocide of the Palestinian people. So he is presenting this persona that he's anti-war, that we need to stop these endless wars. But as I said before, a lot of these people that said, no, we need to call for peace between Russia and Ukraine and stop giving out the blank check. When you change the country from Ukraine to China or Israel, their position changes. Now, all of a sudden, RFK Jr. is not for peace. RFK Jr. is saying, yeah, let's give them weapons and let them, go take it out. And if he was president, that is exactly what he would be doing.
Neither has done anything to reverse the erosion of the American middle class. Both of them are powerless to rein in our exploding deficits. They have contributed equally to the corporate giveaways, to the corruption in Washington, and to the erection of a surveillance state. Yeah, there are good and honest people within both parties, even in their leadership, but the system itself is hopelessly corrupt.
So you see what he does there? Notice how he made sure to call out the system, but notice at the same time, he said there's good and honest people in the leadership in both parties. No, there isn't. When you look at the leadership, because we talked about this before, right? We talked about Democrats thinking that progressives can still go into the Democratic Party and disrupt things, which they can't anymore. We see that's not going to work. The thing is, the people that are in those leadership positions in the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, they take corporate money. They're not grassroots people. They're corrupt too. You have to be willing not to just call out the system, but also to call out the individuals, the people themselves as corrupt. There's a reason why they're in those positions. What did they do to get there? Nancy Pelosi was Speaker of the House. Nancy Pelosi is corrupt. Doing stock trading, Nancy Pelosi is corrupt. We got to call these things out. Hakeem Jeffries is corrupt. And if you can't go that far to even like you're making excuses for the leadership of those parties, no, those people are corrupt. They don't have to take that money. They don't have to sit in that seat. They're there because they choose to be corrupt and they're doing the bidding of those corporations. If they were not doing the bidding of those corporations, they wouldn't be in those seats. Money runs the world. Now, let's go to this clip here where it says RFK Jr. calls out the paralysis of the two-party system. Listen to this.
And I'm going to tell you that because of that, it's going to be very hard for people to tell whether my administration is left or right. Is it right-wing to support small farms? Is it right or left to pull our nation back from the brink of a war with Russia?
You see that? Pull our nation back on the brink of a, hold on, let's go back to that. These are the things people should pay attention to.
Is it right or left to pull our nation back from the brink of a war with Russia?
Pull the nation back from the brink of a war with Russia, but give money and weapons and aid to Israel. It just, it's these types of things. And one thing I noticed at his announcement for president, he didn't bring up Israel and Palestine. I was there on the ground. I covered the whole event. He didn't go into that. He talked about Russian-Ukraine conflict, but he didn't go into the whole Israel-Palestine. Similar with this rally. He didn't really get into the whole Israel-Palestine conflict. He's saving that for interviews. Why is RFK Jr. not talking about this situation at these presidential rallies?
Is it right or left to implement a tamper-proof election system that also guarantees that everyone has a right to vote? As long as we're locked in these habitual debates, the two parties are often blind to common sense solutions. The formula has left them unable to govern. Practically every year we do what we did 2 weeks ago or a week ago, which is to come this far from defaulting on a government shutdown. And that's just the most obvious example of the paralysis of the two-party system. The system runs on inertia, year after year, decade after decade. It's like a runaway bus filled with teenagers fighting about who should take the wheel, and they ultimately learn that whoever the driver is, they're all obeying a GPS with a program that's written by lobbyists and corrupt corporate insiders. So I'm not going to just take the wheel. I'm going to reboot the GPS.
So do you guys see what he's doing? He's talking about corruption. He's like, I'm going to take over that wheel. I'm going to reboot the GPS. Not if you're taking corporate money, you're not. Not if you're siding with establishment politicians who are saying, yes, let's go ahead and give that money to Israel and that we stand with Israel. You're not going to take over no GPS. It is very clear to me that RFK Jr. is trying to make sure that he's in good with PACs like AIPAC, with the Israeli lobby, so that he can get more donations, more funding. And he's been raising a lot of money. That money ain't coming from people like, it ain't coming from me. So how are you going to change the GPS if you can't even have a conversation with someone like Max Blumenthal about the issue with Israel and Palestine? And he's, by the way, if this conversation ever does happen, by the time the conversation already happens, it's going to be too damn late, because he's gone on to multiple shows spreading that lie. Just like the clip that I showed you earlier tonight, lying that the Palestinians didn't want peace. These are outright lies. Everybody's wrong with him. He said that Harvard University was incorrect, that Israel did anything wrong. He said that because Harvard said Israel was wrong. Some of the things, the atrocities that Israel has done. He said that Harvard was wrong. Everybody is wrong about this particular issue when they talk about the atrocities that Israel has done, except for RFK Jr. Have you noticed this? They control the airwaves. They control the sea. They control the resources. They have all the power. But according to RFK Jr., it's the Palestinian people that are the problem. He has gone on show after show and repeated these gross lies. So he's not going to change no damn GPS. RFK Jr. going to try to fit right in. And what he's doing is he's basically co-opted the same messaging from Bernie campaign, gone a step further and choosing to do it as an independent, calling out the corruption. He is tricking the people and making you think that he's going to be the anti-corrupt candidate, when in reality, he's just an establishment. He's to the right of Joe Biden when we talk about the Israel-Palestine issue. He's no different than Hakeem Jeffries when he says that we are unwavering support for Israel. He's no different. This guy is fooling people. And that's what people got to wake up and see. I'm trying to tell you, this is a game. Let's continue, and then I'll show you some receipts.
And you know who's going to set the new destination? You are. Now, because as I've traveled this country, I've listened to you, and I know what your hopes are for the future, and I know your idealism. And together we're going to set the GPS toward the promised land, the promise that Jonathan Winthrop gave us, the great Puritan leader in 1630, when he stood on the deck of the sloop Arbella and said and pointed to the verdant landscapes that no European had ever seen. And he said, we're going to build here a promised land, a city on a hill, a lamp to all the other nations in the world, an exemplary nation. And we came close to fulfilling that destiny in the years after World War II. You know, when the king and queen look over the balustrades of their castle and they see all of their subjects fighting each other, they go back to the banquet room and they pop champagne corks, as they know as long as we're all feuding with each other, and nobody's coming over the castle walls. So this hatred we have for each other is orchestrated. And what my job is during this campaign and then during my presidency is to unify Americans. And then we're all going to go over the castle wall together.
So this is the part that's hilarious. The fact that he said he's going to unify people. We're all go over the castle wall together. How are you going to unify people? And you won't even talk to people that disagree with you on Israel and Palestine. But we all going to be unified and we're going to all go over the wall together. Does that include Palestinians? Do Palestinian people get to go over that wall too? Or do they got to stay behind the wall? This kind of stuff. Last part here, he talks about, again, unity and people trying to get along.
But today, as the corrupt powers have overtaken our government, the ranks of the dispossessed have swelled so that they not only include indigenous Americans and Black Americans and Hispanic Americans, they include tens of millions of people who live paycheck to paycheck in financial desperation.
What was really interesting to me is that this rally took place on Indigenous Peoples Day, right? Which was yesterday. And there was a speaker, an Indigenous speaker. And well, so this what he tried to do. Let's bring up Indigenous people, Black people, Like, how can you even really honor Indigenous Peoples Day and you're not willing to honor the Indigenous people of Palestine? It was Palestine. The Palestinians are Semites. So how, you miss me with all this. The same thing with Mark Hamill. The number of people that were talking about, let's not forget about the Indigenous people on Indigenous People Day, are the same people forgetting about the Indigenous people in Palestine. There's no way.
The dispossessed also include the legions of the chronically ill, of the addicted, the depressed, the 80% of our country that cannot afford a middle-class lifestyle. A rising tide of discontent is now swamping our country. There's danger in this discontent, but there's also opportunity and promise. The danger is that the demagogues will hijack it toward fascism, or that our rulers will divert us to use it as a pretense for an attack on an existential enemy, another in the long pipelines of continuous wars. The biggest danger that we've all seen on a day-to-day basis is that they'll direct that discontent against each other. As Abraham Lincoln observed, quoting Jesus Christ, a house divided cannot stand. A polarized nation is easy for corrupt powers to manipulate and to control and to strip the wealth, its freedoms, its equity, its dignity. Those are the dangers. So what is the promise? The promise is a reunion.
Let me just pause here for a second because I got to say something about the Abraham Lincoln thing. That's such a Kennedy thing to do. I live here in Massachusetts. That's such a Kennedy thing. They always like to bring up Abraham Lincoln said a house divided should not stand. Martin Luther King said da-da-da-da-da. It's always, they'll tell you the other things that MLK said. Like they'll say Martin Luther King said to judge people by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. They won't tell you Martin Luther King said beware of the white moderate. They'll leave that part out. They won't mention that. It's what fits their narrative. Now he says, Abraham Lincoln says a house divided cannot stand, but he's totally fine with Israel and Palestine being divided. He's totally fine with the Palestinian people being cooped up in an open air prison in Gaza. He's totally fine with that divide because he's in bed with people that are going to give him much for his campaign, because he is going to, we're going to pay attention to this because I follow receipts. He is going to take money from that Israeli lobby. He is going to take money from his Israeli organizations.
We're told today that our nation is hopelessly divided. But I found something different as I travel this country. The most hateful voices, of course, are always the loudest. But there are a lot of quiet Americans who are looking at disgust without the vitriol, the name calling, and the venom.
Now, here he is talking about Americans looking at the name calling that's happening as discussed. But I sat there and watched you on interviews refer to Palestinian people as terrorists. You know, it's so hypocritical. It's like the speech and what he's actually doing in real time don't add up.
They want it to end. They want us to get along. They want to end. And you know, those loud, hateful controversies obscure these vast areas of agreement. Most of us agree, for example, that we should take care of our veterans. Most of us agree that we should seek peace abroad instead of war.
Most of us agree that we should seek peace abroad instead of war, but he don't even agree with that himself. He's not seeking for any type of peace abroad with Israel and Palestine. He's not seeking for any type of peace with China either. You see, his speech contradicts what he's saying on social media and what he's saying in interviews.
We all agree that teachers should receive decent salaries and respect. We all agree that housing should be affordable and that corporations should pay their fair share.
See what I mean about the Bernie Sanders stuff?
We all agree that we want a clean environment, that we want wholesome communities for our children. And yet these universal yearnings stand alongside a broad agreement that our country has lost its way. Americans are weary, they're tired of the culture war, the phony slogans, the politicians who use the partisan blame game to divide us against each other and keep us all at each other's throats. And people suspect that the divisions are deliberately orchestrated and that getting us there.
And he participates in those divisions as well. And let me show you something about the funding. Oh, Eric, did you can you go back to the link from the link page? Because I want to pull up that funding. Yeah, it's on the notepad. Sorry. Yep, from Teddy. Look at this. We talk about funding. This is from Teddy Schleifer. So Teddy has been following candidate funding. Here's more on RFK Jr.'s new support in Silicon Valley. RFK is coming back to Silicon Valley for a fundraiser later this month, I have learned. Listen to this. Kennedy has found a substantial base of financial support among tech industry contrarians. I told you he was getting money from tech. This includes David Sachs, who hosted RFK for a Twitter space with Elon a few months back, along with the fundraiser at his home. Now Kennedy is scheduled to return to the area to raise money for some anti-jab donors at an event on October 28th in the South Bay, according to an invite I've seen. The event is at the home of Steve Kirsch, a tech executive turned jab skeptic. So even in his speech, when he's like complaining about tech, this is where he's getting his money from, though. Electing RFK Jr. as our next president is the easiest way to end the jab insanity. Kirsch has said about his fundraiser. Tickets go for $2,500 or $5,000. And Kirsch told me he thinks he can raise $500,000 at his house. I told you guys, see, I see the game. And it was funny to me, you know, people were calling Cornel West out. He was having a fundraiser and it said up to $100 for the lowest amount per plate. That's up to, obviously you could have still come. But meanwhile, you had RFK here And this is the second one. I saw another fundraiser where the minimum was like 1,500. This time they have the minimum for 2,500 or 5,000. So he's getting a lot of money. He's taking corporate. This is corporate money. So what I'm basically telling you guys is this. People don't give you money without something in return. When you are running for office, you're taking corporate money. So all these tech guys are getting behind RFK Jr. because the plan is to put someone in that is going to push back against the jab nonsense. Now, I've talked about mandates and stuff before on the show. I'm gonna get too deep in it because YouTube can be a little, you know how they coming for things. You know, I did not agree with the mandates. But that being said, they expect something in return, and they have all decided to get together. Let's get together and let's get as much money for RFK Jr. as we can. So in return, he can do this for us. They don't care that RFK Jr. is bad on Israel and Palestine. They don't care that RFK Jr. has flip-flopped in reference to police brutality and qualified immunity. They don't care that RFK Jr. has flip-flopped on healthcare. They don't care that he's flip-flopped on the abortion issue. This is a bunch of rich tech white dudes in Silicon Valley getting together to push forth for their agenda, what benefits them. And then people have the nerve to turn around and point to me and tell me that I can't push for my own agenda. Don't talk about the issues that are relevant to your community because it's divisive, but it's okay for rich people to get together and talk about what is good for their community. And these are the type of things that people need to pay attention to. That's where that money coming from. And then this piece up here, RFK Jr. Super PAC has raised 11 million in the last 24 hours, 28 million total raised since late last year. And then this piece right here, the RFK Super PAC is in talks with Elon Musk about a donation, I'm told by sources. Now, let me tell you something about this. Remember, Elon Musk did those Twitter spaces for different presidential candidates? He did one for RFK. He did one for Ron DeSantis. He did one for Vivek Ramaswamy. Now, all of these people are funded by David Sacks. David Sacks has held fundraisers for Vivek, for Ron DeSantis, and for RFK Jr. Did Elon host a Twitter space or offer Twitter space for all the presidential candidates? No, he did not. Just the ones that fit his financial interests. So if Elon Musk is going to go through with a donation to RFK Jr., then what does that mean for the X platform? All these people are together. David Sacks is a billionaire. Elon Musk is a billionaire. And for RFK Jr. to stand there and to tell you that he's going to push back against corporate interests and he's going to sit up there and make sure these corporations pay their fair share and he's getting his money from billionaires, RFK Jr. is lying to you. And if you guys believe that, I don't know what to tell you. That's who he's working for. And if he becomes president, those are the people he's going to look out for. That's why he said he don't want to change anything with the taxes, because he want to make sure that his rich friends and himself, because he's also rich, that they don't get anything else, or they don't have anything else to pay for, that they don't have to pay their fair share of taxes. That's why he said he's not going to touch the tax situation. You think he's going to take money from his friends to run for office and then get into office and then hurt his rich friends and himself? No,